Hi guys, and welcome back. Today we are going to be building the 4-liter motor cover. This is your very common 6-cylinder engine found in a lot of off-road vehicles. It's a pretty straightforward engine, not too many pieces. As usual, we're going to be using our medium gap filling hobby grade glue. I prefer the purple Bob Smith, and your standard hobby kicker. Alright, so included in everybody's kits is going to be one of these applicator tips. This is a used one that I have on my glue already. I'm going to go ahead and snip the end off of that. You'll have one of those in every kit, so don't worry about going out and getting one of those. For this model, we're going to start with the two halves of the block or motor cover. So we're going to just test fit them together, make sure we understand how they line up in the front. And on the top are going to be your most critical to make sure you are centered up with. Now, doesn't matter which half you pick, but you're going to go ahead and apply glue to this upper section. Remember, we don't need a ton of glue to hold these together. They will seal very well. We're going to add a little bit to the front here in this gap. And then we're going to just add some to the back here. On the opposite part, we're going to take our kicker, give it a spray like normal, and then we're going to hold these two halves together until they activate. Now keep in mind to make sure your front face is nice and even, and your top face is going to kick quick. So try to line them up the best you can. Pre-fit them. Do what you have to. Now, you're going to have a nice sealed seam on the front. That'll get covered up later. You won't even see the seam, and same with the top. There should be no gaps on the top and the front. If you have a small gap on the bottom and the front here, don't worry about that. That won't affect anything. The most critical sections, again, are the top and the front. Alright, so now that we've gotten that done, we're going to go ahead and we are going to install the head. So, there are some guide holes on these. If you notice, we have 2 holes on the top. Those will line up with these holes, just to help you eyeball through. You can place a small screw in there if you want for some extra strength. But we're going to go ahead and look at it, figure out which way the head goes on. Again, these are offset, so you'll see these 2 holes line up with the 2 holes on the top of the engine. Alright, so we're going to go ahead, same process, we're going to glue the bottom side of the head. And I'm just putting some dots down the middle of it. That way it won't ooze out when I put the pressure on. Give it a spray on the motor. Check that I have the holes on the right side one more time. And I'm going to ensure that I am as even as possible on the front, back, and sides, like so. At this point, your engine should look something like this. We're going to move on to our next step, which is going to be the side pieces. So, we have our exhaust and our intake to work with. So if you take a look at the side, our exhaust is going to drop in to these notches up top here, coming out the side of the head, and they will fall right in. You wiggle them around if you're not lined up quite right, and they'll sit in there firmly. They won't sit on top, they'll actually recess in. In this bottom section, these are going to end up on top of that exhaust piece. So we'll start with this. For this, we're going to go ahead and add some glue into each one of these pockets. And don't be nervous, if you get a little bit down the side of it, it will be covered up by the exhaust and you won't be able to see it. We're going to go ahead and spray, and I've the exhaust itself, and then we're going to press firmly once we are lined up there into each one of these pockets. We're going to make sure we're applying pressure at the top here. because this is going to be your main contact point, is the exhaust to the head itself. Alright, so that kicker is activated. You can see there, we're nice and firmly in place. We're inside each of the little cavities, and we can move on to the next step, which is going to be part of your intake. Now, this is going to line up on the top here, like so. We are going to, before that, we're going to make our lives a little easier. We're going to take the top of our intake and we're going to glue this to the top first, like this. That way we don't have to fumble around with it later. It's very straightforward. You have a square pattern on here, and it's simply just going to glue to the bottom there, lining up that hole. And if you're not sure which orientation, don't be afraid to go to the website, look through the photos, take your time with this. I've made quite a few of these, so I can almost do them in my sleep at this point. But same process, just a couple drops of glue. It's a smaller part, we don't need a lot. To go ahead and give a little spray to the underside of that, of the throttle body. And we're going to line up the intake in the center of that square, like that. The activator is going to kick really fast, and that looks good. So now, like I said before, how this is going to fit is this hole on the bottom here of your intake pipe. Get a good look so you guys can see that. Is going to be on this line up in this area over here. So how we're going to do that is I recommend test fitting it first. This will slip in between the header. Now I would practice 1 or 2 times before you go ahead and do that, but if you with a little bit of an angle, you can get it in there nicely. Now I haven't glued it yet, I'm just fitting, and then everything will line up cleanly against the side of the head. So we've done our test fit. Let's go ahead and do it for real. I'm going to apply some glue to the mating surfaces. Don't need a lot, guys. Just a couple drops on each one. Give the engine a spray. We're going to tip between the exhausts and hold, like so. And that should be good. If you want some additional strength, you can go ahead and fill the small gap down here with some glue. It's not really necessary, but if you're going to be bashing the car around, it doesn't hurt. Alright, now we're going to move on to our valve cover. Now if you notice on the valve cover, one side has these cutouts that line up with this portion of the head. So as usual, do your test fit. You'll notice when you drop it on though, that it's going to line up and be a hard stop against those. So, nice easy way to tell which way is the correct way. We're going to apply our glue onto the bottom here. I like to just do one decent size path right down the middle, staying away from the front and back edge so we don't have anything spraying out. Give the motor a little kick, and drop it on just like that. And we're good. Alright. Now gets to the little bit more tricky part. It's not bad, just you have to pay attention. So, we have two pieces that are going to look very similar to you, and it might be hard to tell which is which in the pictures on the website, just because once they have everything on it, they kind of hide the shapes of these. But the best way to tell is this piece right here is going to be your power steering pump, and that is going to go on the right side of the engine. So you'll see as you can drop it right down and on. And what's going to happen is this portion sticking out the back of it is going to rest on the motor. And it's going to give you that nice clean fit, like so. And if you want to be extra cautious, and you also notice, that it will follow the curve of this portion here. Similar goes for the other side. This piece sticking out over here, oh, sorry guys, is going to be your alternator. This is going to be the center of your alternator once we glue it together. So that is going to go on the opposite side, and it is going to fit on. Oops, let me get that in there for you. This is why test fits are important. All right, let me get this so you can see it. So this is going to fit on the top portion there. So you'll have your alternator sticking out. You'll notice the shape on the bottom is going to recess down into there and fit perfectly with the top of the portion of the block. So now we're confident we know which way these go on. We can go ahead and before we glue it on, we're going to actually assemble that alternator we just talked about. So there's an alignment hole down the middle. You're going to have your two halves of your alternator that come in your kit. The one with the nubs coming off of it are going to be the front half, and the more rounder piece is going to be your back half. So I like to start with the front half. And so we're going to put a couple drops of glue onto that mount that we were fitting earlier. Give a little spray to the alternator front, and then we're going to line up those two nubs with the two parts coming off the bracket like so. So we're going to have one here and one down here in line with these connectors. That way, that'll give you a cleaner look and it'll look more scale. Now we're lined up, you can see we have that aligning hole down the middle so you can tell you're on center. And we're just going to repeat the process with the back half of the alternator. This one does not need to go on in any specific way. If you want, you can try to line up the features on the alternator by eye to give you a little bit more of a scale look. But at the end of the day, it's not critical where it goes. Just make sure you're lined up with that center hole and you can see all the way through your alternator. That will tell you that you are on straight. All right, so now that we have our alternator on nice, we're on the bracket. We'll go ahead and add the front pulley. There are several pulleys. For this part, I recommend you look at the website, as you're going to be able to see more closely which one is which. For the alternator, it is going to be the smallest one. It's very simple. You're going to have a flat side on the back of the pulley and a cup side on the front. We're simply going to apply a little bit of glue to the back. Just a couple drops. Give a spray on the alternator. And again, using that center hole, we are going to line that up like so. So now we have a nice scale, color correct alternator on the bracket. Now it's time to mount it to the motor. So, one more time, we're just going to check for our position. We're going to see the alignment hole here at the bottom between the bracket and the engine. You'll see that hole right there. That's going to give you a good reference point when you're gluing this down. You're going to glue this half on first. So I recommend adding the glue to the engine in that region around that alignment hole that we saw earlier. Just because if you apply it to the bracket, there's a high chance you will add a little bit too much glue or be a little bit off. Because believe it or not, it doesn't actually touch the head in most instances if you're too far back. So I see I have a small gap. You can fill that with glue if you want, but if you're too far back like that, it's not a big deal. As long as you only apply the glue to the block itself, this isn't going to go anywhere. So we're all glued on there. So we'll move on to the next one. Now we've already pre-fitted this. As some of you are already ahead of me, you'll see that it's going to line up right in front of the first bracket that we just installed. Like so. And it's just going to glue into place there. So, same process. We're going to take a look at our engine. You'll see we have 2 aligning holes on this one, here, and the original one that we just used for the upper bracket. And we'll see that we're going to be in contact in this whole region down here, where it's recessed on the motor. So go ahead, double check your fits, get your glue out, and just add a couple dots of glue all the way down in that whole region there. Give a spray to the back of the bracket. And drop her into place, like so. Alright, that should be cured. Alright, so now we are all mounted on the front there, as you can see. Now we'll start working on some of the detailed pieces. We have 2 of these caps. One of them is going to fit in the middle of the valve cover like that, and one of them is going to go onto your power steering pump, which we showed in the beginning when we were talking about the 2 brackets. So it's going to sit right up on top there around that hole. So we'll start with the power steering pump one. I recommend putting the glue on the cap itself. And again, just a couple small dots is plenty. Give a little spray to the top of the power steering pump. Flip it over. Use your alignment hole to tell it that you're in the center. And it should look something like that. Alright, we'll repeat the process for the one that goes on top of the valve cover. A couple drops onto the cap. Spray the top. Using my alignment hole, I'm then going to line that up. Kicker's going to activate. We are on there. All right, back to the front of the engine. So, if you take a look, we're going to have our main pulley on the bottom here. They just glue on. There's no keying features on these. We're going to have 2 similar pulleys here. One of them is going to fit over in this region, The other one is going to fit just above the main pulley. You then are going to have two smaller caps, but not quite as small as the one on the alternator. One of these is going to go on your power steering pump, and one of them is going to go on this pulley right here. So just get a feel for where they're going to go before you start gluing anything. I recommend putting the motor in this vertical position, taking a look around, figuring out what's going to be where, and just kind of gauge how everything looks to you. All right. So now we're going to start gluing them on. For these, I'm going to glue the motor itself. I'm just going to go all the way around that portion. Give the pulley a spray. And using the middle hole again to make sure I'm on center, I'm going to drop that guy into place. I'm going to repeat the process for all of these. I'll move a little closer for you guys. All right, and now at this point, you can leave them, or if you want, you can add a little bit of glue to the inside. Don't add a lot because on some of these there's no back. Just gonna add a little bit of glue inside each pulley to strengthen that seal between them and the motor. Make sure they don't go anywhere for any hard bashers. This is where this applicator tip comes in nice and handy, because it's easier to get into those crevices that you wouldn't be able to get to with just your standard glue nozzle. All right, moving on. We now have our oil filter and our distributor cap. Those are both going to be located on this side of the engine. We're going to start with our distributor by flipping the cap upside down, applying a little glue to the bottom, and using this funnel looking piece, we're going to spray the wider section of it, and we're going to center that up at the bottom of the distributor. We're then going to apply a little more glue onto the bottom of that funnel. Spray the side of our engine, and we're going to mount it on its base, which is right here. And keep in mind, the distributor cap is not supposed to touch the engine. It's set at an angle, so make sure you're not trying to push this on crooked. So once you're centered up, add a little more glue to that one. That one didn't want to stay. And our spray. So like I was saying, you should have a gap between the head and the cap. So you'll see it's glued at an angle. Alright, and then we're going to finish up by gluing on this oil filter. Like so. Look around, make sure everything's the way we want it. All right, your kit will also include this starter. If you want to mount this, you can. There's not really any specific location for it. Oh, I shouldn't say that. It'll mount onto the side here. I don't include it on the pre-assembled ones because sometimes people like to use these tabs to mount the motor on or support the motor with. But if you want to use this, simply glue the top portion of it there. Push it up against this and rest it like so. Again, up to you. It's not included on the pre-built ones, so it won't be included with this one that I just assembled. But it's an extra little bonus piece for you, those of you that have the kit. All right. Feel free to reach out to me on the Instagram or Facebook accounts. If you have any questions, I'm always there to help. Try to get back to everybody as quickly as possible. But there you have it. All right. I'll see you in the next one, guys.